Hey folks, are you building modern web apps with Angular? Well, good for you. But have you considered how you're going to bring them to mobile or desktop apps? Well, let's talk about welcoming Angular UI, styles, and code all on cross-platform .NET native apps with Uno Platform. Let's get into it. All right, so first thing is let's start on the web side of things first. A lot of you love Angular. It's opinionated. It's meant for big modern web apps that are great for enterprise. It's nicely structured architecturally, so you have all the tooling to be successful. But if you have to start from the absolute basics, like one of the quickest way to start is Angular CLI. So I'm here on Angular Dev. I can look at all the documentation. Here's how I get started. It's super simple. I can do npm or yarn or bun to install the bits, and then I can do an npm install and ng new to essentially start up my app. I can go into my solution, and then I can build up and start working on my Angular app. So I already have that. So let's pull up Visual Studio Code here. And you can do this on any IDE, of course. So let's look at a very simple CLI app. So this is kind of out of the box what you get in an Angular CLI app. You get your source folder, which has all of your code. You get some configurations and other things. So I haven't really done much to it, except for in my HTML, I have added just a couple of things in here. Just in the hello world getting set up, UI, I have added a little thing here so I can measure the screen width and height, just so I know the window of the browser that you're on. And in here, I have also added a button so I can get some device information. But right now, we are just going to be on a browser. We don't have this implemented yet on the web side of things. But I do have some code here in the app.ts, the TypeScript file, where I am listening to the window sizing event. And essentially, I'm listening to the browser giving me the inner width and height, right? So once I have this, I can run this app very quickly. Let's do an ng serve, and I can do a -- open just to do a quick build and open up this app in my browser. And it works. And this is the classic Angular look and feel that you get. You got all of the docs and tutorials here on the right. But this is my two little things that I've added, like my app, screen width and height. And you'll notice that if I, resize my browser window, the screen width changes. And again, if I make it, smaller, the screen height would change as well, because I have those listeners in place. Let me see if I can grab the handle, or let's do this. There you go. So now both the screen width and the height are changing. So clearly this is an Angular app, works just fine on my, web browser, right? But how do I bring this to a native app, like on a mobile or a desktop form factor? And can I actually leverage some .NET APIs? Because the moment you are in a browser, you are sandbox, but when you are on a native app platform like iOS or Android or Windows or Mac OS, Linux, you have all of these platform APIs that you can access, and that can give you a much more richer user experience. So can my TypeScript and Angular app actually leverage some of those APIs? So the answer is obviously yes. So let's take a look at how we do this. Well, first up is Uno Platform. This is my beloved stack for building cross-platform .NET apps. Any platform that you can think of. Essentially, if you start with Uno Platform, you get a single shared code base from where you can reach iOS or Android, web browsers through WebAssembly, and Mac OS, Linux, Windows, and embedded systems. On top of it is a lot of design and AI tools that keeps you productive, lots of extensions, toolkits, and themes. So you are all set up for productivity. But it actually has some really nice things to welcome web UI and web styles inside of cross-platform native apps. And that is done through a modern web view. And we have this nicely documented. We'll get back to this page in just a second, but let's get rolling here first. So if I show you the code here, this is my Angular CLI. So what I have done here is done an ng build with production settings. And what it does is it just flattens everything. All of my CSS, my JavaScript, everything gets flattened out into just a static file. And those are available right here. So I have my index.html, my main.js, and my styles. Everything is now flat and ready for me to deploy. So what can I do with these flat Angular files in a .NET native app, right? So let's switch up to where we are going to be in a Uno Platform app. So let's open up Uno Angular app here. Let's find that really quick. There we go. So this is from scratch, a .NET cross-platform solution with Uno platform templates. So it has the usual things in it. So let's collapse everything here. So this is kind of what you get in an Uno platform app. Everything is a single solution. Everything here is XAML, C#, and you get some platform folders, which are platform-specific things in case you need screenshots or other specific static files that are needed for iOS, Android, WebAssembly, or desktop. Those go into those folders, but otherwise it's truly a single shared solution. So it's using the latest Uno SDKs, and if I look at my CS proj here, again, nothing out of ordinary. This one is just essentially saying, here are all the places where my app can run. Here are some of the Uno features we are using, and that's it. Now, there are a couple more things in here that I will show you that are interesting. So let's go, actually, you can do this on any platform, but I am choosing to do this on iOS. So in my iOS specific folder, I have a resources folder, and then inside of it is web content. And you'll notice that these are exactly the files that I had in my Angular project. So those are the exact files, right? So I've copied them over. And what I'm essentially saying here is, hey, bundle everything that you see in that web content folder as a static resource, just so every time I do a .NET build, it builds it and bundles it in as a resource. So let's actually get ready to deploy this. I had this running on iOS, so let's make sure I have the right simulators in place. Yep, that should be good. And let's actually fire this up, and I will walk you through a little bit of what the magic glue is behind the scenes as it's doing a build. It's doing a .NET 10 iOS build, finding the iOS simulator. And I don't have the simulator running, so it'll be a cold start, but you'll get to see what it's doing. So actually, while the app is spinning up, we can actually look through a little bit of code. It brings up an iPhone 16, which I didn't ask for. I'm looking for this iPad 16 simulator. So up comes the simulator, and it's launching the Uno platform app. So let's actually go back and look at what this is. So the magic here is with WebView 2. This is a nice modern abstracted UI component, and it's meant to render web UI, right? So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can bring it all, and it will happily render, and it works cross-platform. So essentially, we are borrowing the web view for whichever platform your app is running on. For iOS, it's something WebKit. For Android, it's like the Chromium one for Windows and macOS. So just whichever corresponding web view fits the platform, that's the one we borrow. And it's got some nice things here. You can just point it to a URL, and it'll happily render. It will actually happily, render some local HTML if you want, and then it will have some WebAssembly support in a frame. You can actually execute some JavaScript. So notice how we can manipulate DOM things as we are loading up any JavaScript in here. And this is the part that we are actually using JavaScript to C# communication. We can have the web view send a message down to C#. That's our .NET host, and the other way around as well. And if we are to have any local web content in my application package, we can load it up in the web view. That's exactly what we are doing here. So we are essentially pointing it to a local resource and saying, here is an HTML, JavaScript, and CSS that happens to be built with Angular. Go load that up. And that's exactly what we're doing. So let's see if our simulator came back on. All right, so it did. So this is the exact same Angular app that we saw on the web. And you'll notice that I do get the screen width and height, even though now we are running inside of a simulator that happens to be iOS or Android or anything else. But it is still a browser window. So the WebView 2 is a browser window. So I can read its inner dimensions of window height and window width. And that's where we get it. But now that we are on an actual native device, I can click on that button. And what it does is it tells me a little bit more about the device that I'm running on. I'm running on an iOS tablet, and my orientation happens to be portrait, right? So these are very native things that I'm pulling out. And those are .NET APIs. So my Angular app is now talking to .NET, and the world is beautiful. So how is all of this working? Well, let's go look at it. First thing is, I'm going to move this debugging window over. So first thing is in my main page.xaml, which is exactly the view that we are on. There is nothing else on it except for a web view. And I'm just saying, hey, just stretch yourself, take up the full screen, and off you go. So if I look at my code behind here, the only thing we are doing here is listening to the web view being loaded up and getting ready for the web view to receive any messages from C#. And essentially, we are mapping a virtual host here and saying, hey, look into this index.html, which happens to be in your web content folder, which is exactly this folder for whichever platform that you're running it on. This happens to be on iOS. So with that, I have also included in my CS proj this little Microsoft interop, JS interop. This helps with the CS, C# and JavaScript communications. It's nice. And then if I look at my index HTML, this is exactly what my Angular index HTML looks like. No surprises here. I'm referencing style sheets and JavaScript. I am including a little bit of Uno interop.js here. So this is essentially what is pointing the JavaScript to invoke my C# function. So it's got this, JS methods in here, and it's trying to look for this get device info method. And once it does find it, it's going to invoke it. And I have a little bit of a div tag here, which shows the result of that invocation. So where is this method? Well, it looks like in app.xaml.cs. This is where, as the app starts up, this is where my get device info is. And notice how with the JS interop, I can, annotate my .NET function as a JS invocable function. So JavaScript can call .NET and the other way around as well. In here, we're just using, native .NET code to say, hey, can you look up the display information, get me the current view, show me the orientation, and so on. So very .NET native code, and anything that, Uno platform has in terms of our non-UI code. So this is all the UI stuff. But if I look at non-UI stuff, your accelerometer, your Bluetooth connections, your capture device enumerations and emails and geolocation and gyrometer, all of those APIs, those are all accessible from TypeScript and JavaScript because of that bridge. So I can invoke that. And since this is actually on iOS, I can make the web view inspectable as well. So notice how my app is running here in an iOS simulator. I can pull up any browser that's corresponding to the one that I'm on. This happens to be iOS. So here is my Angular app running inside of my iPad 16 simulator, right? It is a native app. So with the DevTools, Safari shows you, and this is exactly the HTML that my app is showing. So let's drill down a little bit. Here's the div tag. Here's the left side and the right side. Let's look into the left side. And here is essentially congratulations on your app. If I dig in further, here's the get device info. Here's that saying I'm running on an iOS tablet on portrait mode. So if you wanted to, change up your HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, look at all the sources, look at all the files that we are, pulling up. These are the 4 files essentially that's in the browser. You can play around with it just the way your web developer mind expects when you're building a web application. So be it on Chromium, be it on Safari, be it on any web browser, on whichever platform that you're on, your DevTools absolutely work, right? So this is simply an example of taking a well-built Angular application and just putting it on a web view in a cross-platform .NET apps. And thanks to the JS interop, JavaScript and C# can talk to each other, and it's a beautiful experience. So bring your Angular UI, bring your styles, bring your code, and when needed, you can invoke .NET APIs. And of course, if it needs to be responsive, based on device configurations, you can do that in your web app. But just so you know, you have a modern web view that is very capable of handling any type of web UI, so that you can throw it its way. So if you like what you see, this exact project of taking an Angular app and just putting it in your Uno platform app, I did push it out to my repository here. That's github.com, my name, and then Uno Angular. So look it up. It's super simple. But what you see here is just a quick little example of Uno platform that brings all of your AI and design help towards building cross-platform .NET apps, now welcoming web content built with Angular. So hope you have fun, and this is a nice little way of bridging the gap between web apps and native apps, and you can bring all of your Angular UI to .NET native apps. So we can't wait to see what you built, and thanks a lot for watching.